There was a recent study that came out, and I just saw it yesterday. One of our writers, Bobby Barak, dove into it in the world of why have so many people abandoned right now the universe of sports. Why are so few people actually watching? It used to be that if you wanted to get a break from the serious things in life, you would actually watch sports. And now sports has basically become politics by any other name. And they did a new YouGov and Yahoo News poll. And the results were nearly half of Americans changed their sports viewing habits once political and social messaging spread across the different sports leagues. And in particular, 3 times as many Americans watch sports less than those who watched more in the past year and change. 34.5% watched less to 11% who watched more. 56.3% said they watched about the same amount. And this is, sometimes people say that they did one thing and they actually did the opposite. Sometimes the data doesn't reflect that people are being honest. But actually, the number of viewers of sports roughly corresponds with what people said in this poll that they put in place. Almost every league is down in some way. And what's interesting about this is they are down at the time that sports theoretically would have been a saving grace more so than it ever has been before. So this is something interesting and intriguing to think about. 53%, by the way, of Republicans said they watched sports less once social justice messaging became prominent. But 19% of Democrats said the same thing. So this was something that became more of an issue, even though the political statements would tend to favor the left wing of the country. But again, 40% of independents chose to watch sports less for the same reason. So we're talking about a pretty massive number of people deciding to abandon sports at a time, in theory, when sports was one of the best entertainment options that was out there for any Americans. And, of course, the sport that has taken the brunt of this the most, I would say, is the NBA, which is continuing to have substantial declines this year. Now, maybe the NBA is going to be saved by not being political this year. It is amazing how much less political the NBA is this year. And also, maybe if you get the Lakers and LeBron James in the finals, even though they were there last year when nobody watched, and you pair them with Kevin Durant and the Brooklyn Nets, James Harden, Kyrie Irving, and you get a major East Coast market in New York and a major West Coast market in LA, maybe that will help to cure all of the mess that the NBA found itself in. But I'm not really sure how exactly this is all going to end up shaking out. And the big issue is, have people's overall viewing habits been changing in a way that was already moving in a negative direction? By which I mean, your kids, if they're anything like my kids, don't sit down and watch as many full games as we did when we were kids. But my kids wake up every morning and look at the highlights on YouTube, right? I mean, they get their iPads, and as they're sitting eating breakfast, whereas you and I, if you're around my age, and I'm 41, if you're around my age, you would flip on SportsCenter and you would check and see what actually happened in sports. If you're older, you might have had a newspaper and you'd go look at the box scores and try to figure out what the news was from the night before in sports with a physical newspaper that you would check out. Well, my kids, they get up and the first thing they do is go watch highlight packages from the night before. Now, this is in some way a downer because younger people watch sports less and older people are being turned off because of the politics in sports. That's a bad duo that is going on right now because what's going on in the larger context is becoming a pretty substantial issue. And again, I think there's also a major issue with the fact that so many people have been at home where they really didn't have anything to do. And in theory, you're selling to a captive audience. And now, as things start to get back to normal and some of the people who were curled up in the fetal position not leaving their basements for a substantial period of time because they were terrified of COVID, as those people start to get out and about much more, it's going to be interesting to see how exactly that shakes out. And by the way, let me give you an example in my own life of things starting to change. My wife's mom and my stepfather-in-law had not seen my kids really close in terms of having a visit in basically a year. Now, we had talked to them on the phone, we'd Zoomed, we'd had all those conversations, but they got nervous because they had a couple of surgeries and they were worried about COVID. They've now got their double vaccines, and they're coming into my house to stay for the weekend for Easter. I would imagine that there are a lot of people in many parts of the country that are going to be welcoming grandparents, elderly relatives for Easter-related events in a way that hasn't happened in the past. Well, I bring that up because so many people have stayed in their homes and interacted in a relatively minimal amount with the larger universe out there, and now are they going to be outside of their homes watching sports even less? I think it's an intriguing question to think about. But again, this is data from a Yahoo Sports study, Yahoo News, as well as YouGov. Nearly 35% of sports fans watched less compared to 11% who watched more. So the political nature of sports in this modern era has been a turnoff to the vast majority of American sports fans, and I don't think that surprises anybody who is in my universe out there that has been listening to this program.